consequences are that Finland and the Baltic Sea nations and NATO have taken this seriously. There's more patrols on the Baltic Sea. There's more surveillance. First of all, corporate America is exiting China, and so are many of the EU businesses as well. And foreign direct investments are reversing the directions. Companies are also not investing. So as right now, we know that China also will not become the largest economy anytime soon.
Welcome back, viewers. In today's video, we're diving into the latest buzz surrounding Xi Jinping's visit to the recent APEC summit. We explore the concept of Finlandization in relation to Taiwan and discuss why this approach may not be as effective as it seems. We examine recent incidents in the Baltic Sea with significant global implications. Join the conversation on the EU's evolving China policy. We shed light on the CCP's double standards when it comes to self-reliance. Let's get started.
Welcome to the show. Today we have a guest from Finland. It's Sari Arho Havrén. Hi, Sari.
Hi. Good to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much. Could you please tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and what's your connection to China and Asia?
Yes, well, I have a long China background. I lived in China and on mainland China and Hong Kong for 15 years. And right now I'm in Brussels, working for Business Finland, strategy, geopolitical foresight. And I also hold some other hats. I'm a RUSI Associate Fellow for China, China's foreign policy, geopolitical competition. I'm also visiting researcher at the University of Helsinki.
Great. Thank you very much. So it's now end of November, and we just had a week ago, we had an APEC summit in the US in San Francisco. What's your take on Xi Jinping's visit in the States? What's its significance, impact? Was it necessary? Should the US invite him or not?
Well, he spoke a lot about openness and the importance of the economic integration of the region for the next 30 years. And he tried very hard to maintain the business executives' confidence on the Chinese market. And no wonder for various reasons. First of all, corporate America is exiting China, and so are many of the EU businesses as well. And foreign direct investments are reversing the directions. Companies are also not investing into China as before, but rather repatriating their profits. And this is poison for China in the current economic downturn. And also because China needs resources. And what I mean by these resources is that they can be anything that the party and the state are in need in certain time. And right now, of course, it's the foreign core and critical technologies. But China also needs the export markets and demand. And the domestic demand has not really picked up. So as right now, we know that China also will not become the largest economy anytime soon. And meanwhile, Xi Jinping, to achieve his own targets of China becoming the tech powerhouse of the world and the leading nation, but foremost to become self-reliant, to insulate China from the outside shocks, let alone to pull through his common prosperity policy. So he needs these resources. He needs to maintain relationships now with the West. But of course, then there's the controversial reality there that China is not exactly investable country at the moment, as has been said. You don't just arbitrarily detain business people, use exit bans, or raid their offices, let alone weaponize imports and set export controls that are politically driven. So this trip politically, geopolitically, I don't think the side meeting between Biden and Xi Jinping achieved very much. So there were the working groups, and that's very good to keep the communication channels open. But mostly I see the result as buying time on both sides, kind of a, if you like, circling the wagons. Xi Jinping's comment on not invading Taiwan in 27 or 35, and Nikkei actually reported about this. And to me, this is trustworthy, as it really follows, as said earlier, that Beijing prefers this peaceful unification, but does not rule out force. So, in the sidelines of APEC, and according to this senior US official who briefed reporters after the summit, so Xi Jinping allegedly insisted that Beijing's preference was for peaceful reunification with Taiwan, but he also said that at some point we need to move towards resolution. And I think this was a bit omitted in the global media.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of optimism, and I don't see really any confirmation. Like Xi Jinping committing to anything sounds already ridiculous. So Biden needed him probably for the elections. Xi Jinping needed probably to restore confidence, as you just said. There is a topic that has been picked up in the global commentary last decade quite a few times, and now in Taiwan also recently here, the supposed Finlandization of Taiwan towards China. So since you're Finnish, I would like to ask you, how does a small nation cooperate, or how does it live next to a huge aggressive neighbor? I think last week you already had a lot of those cyclists coming over from Russia, right? So how does it look like a small country living next to a dictatorship?
Well, indeed, yeah. First, we had the Baltic connector pipeline damage, which we still don't know whether it was intentional or not. And now we have these people that are pushed over the border. And what you ask about the Finlandization, this is really interesting comparison, because of course there are obviously similarities what comes to Taiwan and Finland and a small nation's geography. There are obviously similarities between Taiwan and Finland what comes to small nation geography next to a big unfriendly neighbor. But at the same time, there are of course differences what comes to using this term for the Finland side. The conditions have been maybe a bit fairly different and happening a bit in a different historical framework. And I'm not actually so familiar with Taiwan's inner politics as I maybe should be. But I believe the comparison derives more from the former President Ma's term from 2008 to 2016, when, in my understanding, Taiwan maybe exerted a kind of a restraint or kind of appeasement or self-censorship on its politics with mainland, if I'm correct.
Yes.
Yeah. And for Finland, this was, of course, more of the case or reality during the Cold War, straight after the Second World War, when Finland was forced to give territory concessions to the Soviet Union. We lost big parts of Karelia, for instance, and we had to pay heavy war reparations. So, and we also had to sign this agreement of friendship, cooperation, and mutual assistance with the Soviet Union. And this was the basis of relations from 48 to 1992. And we were forced to kind of a balance to keep our independence and the way of life which of course is a similarity with Taiwan. But we also have to remember that straight after the war, the Finnish leaders and presidents, they had first-hand memories of the war and the defeat and the heavy toll and the consequences. And many have actually confessed in their memoirs, or there are archive sources about this, and I have studied them myself when I did my doctorate thesis, that they were really afraid long after about the possibility of the Soviet occupation.
This is the channel where world's top experts on Asian politics and security discuss recent and future events.
I would like to little bit make a difference between this kind of a deliberate opportunistic appeasement and a situation that is driven by sheer strategy of maintaining one's independence. That I think was the case straight after the war in Finland. But then during 70s and 80s, we definitely witnessed this kind of an opportunistic appeasement in Finland, which was kind of the nature was a little bit different. But small nations such as Taiwan and Finland, we can't change our geography, and we need to play our cards well, what we have in hand in different times and circumstances. But however, about this opportunistic appeasement, I don't know Taiwanese society as well or enough to know how wide this kind of a sentiments run there. But I would like to draw a comparison actually to the Western Europe at this time, because the Finlandization is well alive in some circles in the Western Europe, especially what comes to China today. And it's fairly ironic, I think, that the term was created in Germany during the Cold War, and Germany has been specifically an example at the moment how the big German companies sometimes almost run the European foreign policy.
It's not something that you would actually suggest or advise here in this with regard to Taiwan, right? It doesn't really work well, as we just saw in recent years, right? No happy ending.
Exactly, and Finland was fairly alone at the time, and we were left, of course, fairly alone to fight against the Soviet Union during the war. Others were busy elsewhere, but the situation is different with Finland being part of NATO.
Yes,
and also that we are going to have the bilateral agreement with the US.
Thank you. I read recently your article, Building a Safe Shared Future for the People's Republic of China. It's really interesting. There is a lot of very valid points. And I wanted to ask you, there is a sentence when you talk about the other frontiers of global governance highlighted within China's proposal. And then you mentioned a few of them. And would you like to discuss one maybe more in detail? Because I think a lot of your posts, tweets, and research circles around those topics, like current China's foreign policy and their governance.
Yes. Yeah, I have been indeed looking at China's this alternative global governance initiatives. They actually published it in September. But of course, there has been these elements that have been published during the past decade. And I've been looking at China's process to institutionalize and progress included to institutionalize a kind of a novel form of global governance or international order for some time. And this is happening already. It's not just that when our democratic leaders speak about China is challenging our rules-based international order, it's more of slowly and systematically also already happening, and China is changing it. It's changing it in the United Nations, in other international organizations, in bilateral relations front. It is in the public discourse. And of course, ignoring some international agreements, such as on the South China Sea, what is happening. China ignored the joint declaration between UK and China. What comes to Hong Kong, coercion, using other means in economic cooperation to align countries with China's policies. These are all part of the kind of a toolbox to align foreign countries with China's policies. So this is happening, but it's asymmetric, and therefore maybe some of our leaders don't actually see the big picture, and we should definitely pay more attention to it. But your ask about these new frontiers in China's proposal for global governance, they are definitely something that will come up. And during the October Belt and Road Forum, China drew directly from this proposal and already introduced the Global Governance Initiative for the artificial intelligence. And the technology is something that has a kind of a leading role at the moment. We have, of course, there the Global Development Initiative, Global Security Initiative, Global Civilizational Initiative, that are kind of a building blocks of this new order. And this AI there as a future-leaning initiative, in my opinion, is very interesting because, again, China came forward proactively with their own initiative. Yes. And have the kind of a first mover advantage, again, in international organizations to proceed, and it will serve in a way as a foundational platform to positioning China as a paradigmic standard. The others that we that were mentioned in this proposal were the deep sea and polar regions, outer space, cyberspace. So we will definitely see some initiatives coming up in these areas, and I think the leaders in European Union, US, we should be more proactive to take the initiative in these fields.
You also, I would like to know your take about this recent, the Finland-Estonia-Baltic connector and the Sweden-Estonia-Finland telecommunication cable, those two incidents, because I think there was a Chinese ship involved, right? And this is not really well known outside of, let's say, Northern Europe.
Right. Yeah. Yes, indeed. And we will likely never know. I mean, it is well established that it was the Chinese vessel that actually broke the pipeline. And then there's clearly some kind of a connection to Russia, which is also well established. But we will likely never know what really happened. There has been accidents when anchors have damaged pipelines before. So it's maybe impossible to establish it for sure that this was intentional, or what was the connection between this Chinese vessel and Russia, because it went to Kaliningrad before there was seemingly a change of crew, and so there are really many suspicious details there. And of course, but at the same time, we can only speculate about the connection and whether it was intentional. But I think the only thing what can be probably established by the international law is to find precedents whether this was intentional or not, and then whether the vessel is liable for damages. But of course, the consequences are that Finland and the Baltic Sea nations and NATO have taken this seriously. There's more patrols on the Baltic Sea, there's more surveillance, countries become ever more prepared, and hopefully in the future it will be more difficult to conduct such operations, especially intentionally.
So maybe this was like a warning, like, red flag, like the balloon above the US recently, maybe something like that for Northern Europe.
Yes, and it appears that Russia definitely is testing the Finland's resolve, preparedness, whether if this was intentional, and now we have the border problem as well, with Russia pushing immigrants across the border.
If you believe in me, please like it, leave a comment and share the show with friends. It might not look like it, but I have quite a lot of expenses. I am not asking for money, only for support. The goal of this program is to spread the knowledge.
Last question. What's your take on the EU-China policy? Because we have those smaller countries that are more Taiwan friendly, like Estonia and Lithuania and Czech Republic, but also they're definitely pro-China, huge economies, like Germany and France. How do you see this from Europe? What's your position on that?
I would say overall, the EU-China policy in general, I think there may be growing appetite by the EU, and especially EU trade, to really address the uneven level playing field with China. And as I said, especially what comes to trade and economic relations. So China's slowing economy trend places the EU in a good position now to build a position of strength. And I think they are starting to use it. And it definitely places the EU in an interesting position what comes to the upcoming EU-China summit in December in Beijing. Also considering the von der Leyen's speech in mid of November that was very clear and fairly strict about China's uneven practices and well, what we know about the pain points. But of course, simultaneously, China keeps EU, Europe, and keeps pushing us not to talk about de-risking or being systemic rivals. And this is absurd in many respects, because self-reliance has been central theme in Chinese policy and in Communist Party documents since 1930s. And Xi Jinping has been using it regularly since 2017 to drive to self-reliance, and then he introduced the dual circulation model. So China has been always de-risking and driving for self-reliance, and been balancing this being openness and these goals to gain the needed resources. But now that the European Union builds self-reliance and economic security and de-risking, this is seen unfair because it confronts the needs that China currently has. So this is basically the overall situation where we are in, that I think Europe is becoming more bold overall from the EU side. But then, of course, and like I hinted when I talked about the Finlandization, we have lines of division in Europe between those political leaders who understand autocrats, especially on the eastern flank countries, and then we have those who still see them in the odd light of change through trade engagement, but which also goes down to this being autonomous, strategically autonomous, especially from the USA, and this is especially French position, and then those in the eastern flank who are more dependent on the American security umbrella, and which is potentially a matter of their existence. So these are Europe, as well known, is not unanimous. And then, of course, Russia and China also use their hybrid influencing to keep Europe divided. And without the common European foreign policy, this will likely go on like this. But I think the positive thing is that the European Union institutions have taken a bit more assertive stance towards China.
Thank you very much for your time, Sari. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you.